I haven't communicated well enough, so I appreciate it if you let me know. And I want to hear, how I can do a better job at educating people to use our tooling as well. But yeah, firstly, big thank you to the organisers for this. Good day, I'm Ali. You can probably hear from my accent that I'm Australian, so I am a developer advocate here at Filecoin. I've only recently started at Filecoin though. I started at the beginning of January, so I'm living the dream now, so it is amazing. I love this team and this Web3 space. And I get to work on my passion of helping enable others to learn, to grow and build, and to support developers like you on your own journeys and be part of like this really amazing open source Web3 community. So I know you've seen some awesome prep docs and talks from other people across industry as well. So I'm going to try and focus my time on some of the cool things that you can do with IPFS and Filecoin. I am going to give a tech overview, but if you do get a little bit lost in the first part of this talk that I'm giving, please don't worry because it is kind of highly technical and there's some easy tools to use it. Where you don't really need to know how it works under the hood. But I want to make sure that like I give everyone a good idea of how it works under the hood because you might be interested in that as well. So I'm super excited to be here, as I said today, building community, growing together and empowering all members of the community to have a voice. So to me, public blockchain and protocols are the ultimate open source project in tech today. And the innovation and inclusivity in the space is really what makes it kind of the driving force and like putting it on the map of the future of tech as well. So there's a huge capability for tech to help transform our lives and also the way our society functions and like redefine and create new industries and collaboration paths to help us solve like complex problems. I mean, we can see this in just our recent COVID past as well. Like developments like the mobile phone and internet have created amazing new collaboration methods and industries. And, we definitely would not have survived COVID probably without some of these technologies. So the kind of pace that we're changing our society at through technology is really kind of mind-blowing when you kind of step back and think about it. And it's one of the big reasons that I'm in tech and why I'm passionate about this industry and keeping things open for everyone and engaging like the whole community to be part of it because we've all got like kind of a unique viewpoint to bring. So thank you to you guys for enabling, us to talk to different types of communities and help them get involved as well. As I said, feel free to ask me any questions as we go as well. There's no stupid questions. So just a few things I'm going to talk about today. I'm, like I said, going to go through the concepts tech and dev tool and tech. If you get lost, don't worry. I did it first as well. So, don't worry. Then I'm going to talk about the dev tooling, which are basically, NPM include packages that you can use to use IPFS and Filecoin without needing to get into all the really highly technical stuff that comes with new protocols. Also want to talk about some of the use cases and cool projects, like to give you some inspiration on maybe what you could do with this data, and then some resources and getting involved in how you can stay in touch. So I'm going to talk about all your storage needs and particularly how we can ensure this data remains in the hands of those who own it or is securely and resiliently stored for future generations, and that it's open because, anyone that's played in this ecosystem or tech in general would know data is an essential part of our daily lives now. And not surprisingly, it's also a super fast growing field in Web3. Because enabling distributed storage mechanisms really kind of enables new applications and use cases to be built out. And with more permanence and like with trustlessness, permissionless, and with fairer and more resilient outcomes, or that's the goal anyway. So to me, the kind of need for these open technologies with censorship resistant properties and permissionless structures is it's never been more apparent than what we're looking at in kind of the world now with a lot of sanctions and, all this other, really crazy stuff going on in the last few years. So with so many macro events happening on top of each other, the original mission of the internet, which was, to provide an interactive world of shared information on communication and collaboration that gives everyone access is kind of even more important to me. And it's essential that we really do this on the data level too. And, you know, as I said, that we include diverse voices in building these products, because we only kind of have to look at the recent biases that were kind of coded into AI facial recognition technologies to see how important like having a voice and empowering people to have a voice is. And we're really on a mission to do that. So there's this, I just want to go back to the Web3 stack, although you're here now, so you probably have kind of a good idea. You've probably even seen this diagram before. You know, and there's multiple reasons that have brought us together today, what you might be interested in learning more. But this diagram, which was made by Nada Dabbit, gives a great kind of intro into the Web3 architecture mental model. And one of the big pieces of that stack is, you know, how do we store data in a way that aligns with the mission that we're here for? So creating a fairer and better technology stack that works for everyone, but that brings the like values of distributed, verifiable, censorship resistant internet owned by the people, but still brings the best learnings of traditional computing with it. So, you know, we're not here to do a, you know, either or scenario between Web 2 and Web 3. I kind of think of it like, how do we make something that brings all the best parts of Web 2 with it, you know, all the ease of access, that's scalable, the efficiency, but kind of breaks the bad parts of Web 2, you know, those silos that we've created, that centralization model that we've created. And this, you know, this essential data piece in the Web3 stack is one of the core problems that IPFS and Filecoin are trying to solve. And not just for the Web3 world either, but also, you know, especially IPFS and, you know, Filecoin as well. We're providing new solutions to the traditional technology arena as well, which is kind of a really big point to note here. And I'll like elaborate a little bit more in future as well. Just to backtrack a bit, I wanted to clear up some of the confusion that might be out there around some of our names you might have heard floating around the eco. So you've probably heard of Protocol Labs, the Filecoin Foundation, and IPFS. And, you know, maybe you kind of think they're the one thing. And while they're tightly affiliated, they're actually separate organizations. So just to explain what they are. Yep. Sorry, have we got some questions or?
Sorry, interrupt you. I think if you're not sharing your screen because it's not.
Oh my gosh. Is it not where? Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you interrupted me. I didn't show you any of that. So can you see that now? Is that sharing?
Yep, we can see the screen.
Oh, well, I mean, you know, there's no stupid questions. Just people forget to share their screens. No. Thank you for interrupting me. I'm so sorry. Oh, okay, cool. Well, I might just backtrack to that little model that I was talking about. So this is the Web3 stack model that I was talking about. And, you know, that verifiable data is essential. And you've probably seen it. But anyway, and by the way, I've got a green box around ceramic there because it actually does use IPFS and Filecoin under the hood too, which is a fun fact. And here, these are the different technology arenas I was talking about before. So just to tell you about the difference, we still do all work together. We're tightly affiliated, but we're working on different pieces of the technology stack, and they are fundamentally different technologies. So Protocol Labs is kind of the open source R&D lab, which you know, is helping build future forward protocols, and it has, you know, a mission to help radically improve the internet and drive breakthroughs in computing. And IPFS and Filecoin are two of the projects that were originally incubated by Protocol Labs, and the white papers of both of these came out in 2014, and in 2015 IPFS was spun out, and you can think of IPFS as a peer-to-peer version of HTTP, so it's a protocol, not actually a blockchain. And in 2019 Filecoin came about as well. So while they're, you know, we all do work together, they're different projects, and that's probably why you'll hear some of the different terms. So I just wanted to clear up some of the confusion that might be out there about that. And hopefully I've kind of set the scene with or without slides, but let's get into those tech concepts of how we're enabling this permissionless, resistant and resilient and censorship resistant data model with IPFS and Filecoin. Just to understand that mission a little bit better, and I know I was kind of alluded to this a little bit. But what motivates us here is IPFS and the Filecoin, why it motivates us so much at IPFS and the Filecoin Foundation is, you know, the current landscape. So the Web 2 model is kind of centralization. And, you know, while this was a convenient path at the time, you know, given that the internet wasn't really designed with an inbuilt identity or security layer, centralization's kind of caused a lot of issues. There's today only a few companies offering storage, and they include kind of Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and my previous workplace, IBM as well. Not sure who really uses IBM Cloud, but it does exist. But anyway, not only this, but several like kind of centralized companies have control of our data via our social media profiles or other logins, and they kind of use this as the basis of their business model. And this leads to like a lot of issues that we've seen recently. And the first one is the lack of security and portability around our own data. So even the ability for large firms to use our collective data against us on a mass level. And there's a great documentary on Netflix about this called The Great Hack, and that looks into the Cambridge Analytica data model and how they use some of that data in some crazy ways. Has anyone here seen that Netflix documentary? Kind of blew my mind, like I knew it was happening, but seeing it all in one place was just kind of, wow, that's crazy. But anyway, this is a big problem, not just for individuals, but also it costs businesses billions of dollars each year, these kind of hacks as well. And the second problem is that if any of these centralized storage systems fail, which we've kind of seen happen countless times, what was down yesterday? Was it GitHub that was down the other day? Anyway, when AWS goes down, some big service goes down. And, you know, this isn't great. It's a bottleneck in a centralized service. So to solve this second kind of resilience engineering challenge, you know, you could start to architect with microservices. You could put multiple redundancy databases in, and you could then, you know, maybe run something like Red Hat on your containerized or Kubernetes containerized applications and create this multi or hybrid cloud environment. And that's one way traditional web is doing it. I should know, it came from IBM, who owns Red Hat now. But by this point, we're kind of diving into decentralization and distributed systems already, and that's just for resilience. And it comes with some really massive engineering and financial overheads to do so. So it kind of leads to the question of, why aren't we designing the web for autonomy and resilience that we need in the first place? And the built-in diversity that we need, just saying. But it also kind of leads us to the original mission of the internet, but to be an open place for knowledge sharing and for collaboration for the benefit of everyone. And that's something that's really becoming more and more apparent, and that we need to really keep pushing and working towards. So how do we get to a world that has a resilient, performant, scalable, all these censorship resistant, free and private, kind of silo busting web, because as we know, when not paying for service, we're the product. So this is exactly the kind of problem we're working on solving at IPFS, and why we're so driven to do so. So I want to talk about the technologies and how they are helping to change this. So first, I want to start with IPFS, or, you know, cue the Star Wars theme here, interplanetary file system. So this isn't just a meme name though, because it's a distributed peer-to-peer network for files and folders, funnily enough. So IPFS was designed to be able to work even when the network is between planets. So if we signed up for, you know, the Elon Musk Mars colony program, and we're now living happily on Mars, maybe it might take us an hour or so to request a file from Earth that we might need. But then if someone else on Mars already has that file, then that person could just serve it to us instantly instead. So you might be thinking that this is just a fancy kind of name for a peer-to-peer network, and that's true. And there's real gravity. Sorry about the puns in that, but IPFS is more than just a peer-to-peer network that's distributed by design and has no central authority as servers. It's also designed to be offline first for resilience, but it also uses a really unique and upgradable standard for addressing content, which is like the main thing that sets it apart. So IPFS is unique because rather than using methods that we might be familiar with for storing and accessing content, so location paths and HTTPS that point to a particular HTTPS address, sorry, and where the content could, fairly easily change from day to day or even cease to exist or be servable, thanks AWS. IPFS uses content addressing. So this means that not only can you be sure when you're accessing an IPFS content ID or CID that you'll receive the exact same piece of content, but you also don't care where that data comes from. And that's, kind of wild. So when I first started looking into IPFS and Filecoin, it was just such a mind shift away from the Web 2 world that I've definitely become accustomed to. But it's such a super elegant solution in its simplicity as well, because shifting our focus from a location-based address to a content-based ID opens the web up to a massively distributed storage solution. We don't need to care about where the content comes from when we can guarantee that we're going to get the same content from a fixed, a CID, a content ID. So it's really kind of cool. And IPFS, and by the way, just to note again, IPFS is a protocol like HTTP is a protocol and not a blockchain. IPFS creates these content IDs, which you can think of like a cryptographic fingerprint, which is shown here, using a cryptographic hash function to create a content identifier for each piece of information. So it means every piece of content has its own unique CID of the same size, regardless of the amount of content it represents. And this can be, this CID, content ID, can be reproduced anytime from the original content. And so you can always verify that the content you've been given is what you asked for. So this content addressing system also works for all kinds of contents, including like folders. It's not just limited to a JPEG. We can represent a full file system using a content addressing structure. So it's super powerful in that respect. I'm just going to pause. Has anyone got any questions at this point, or I'll just keep carrying on? I will get to the cool stuff, I promise. I just wanted to make sure that I did show you how it works under the hood, so you don't just have to believe me. You can go and see how this works as well. All right, I don't think there's any questions. Cool. So in order to build up what can be like these big data structures, IPFS uses a Merkle DAG, or directed acyclic graph, to move from this location-based addressing that we're used to in HTTP to content addressing. And by replacing locations with the root content ID of the content, as you can kind of see in this graph as well. Excuse me. This also kind of means a mental change in how we think about copying or moving files as well, because, copying a file really becomes unnecessary when we're able to identify that content by a CID and when it's already stored in multiple places. And this is what we call deduplication, just to put a big word on something. No, engineers love big words almost as much as lawyers, I think, sometimes. But anyway, instead, if we wanted to add, instead we would just modify, like, for example, if we wanted to add our little Filecoin corgi there, who I like to call Biscuit, to the second folder that's got the kangaroo, as an example, we could just modify the containing folder to reference the content and then propagate this like new content IDs up through the of that folder, up through to the root CID. So it's pretty neat because, like I said earlier, the fact that a content ID always represents the same piece of information means we're retaining the verifiability of that piece of data, as well as unlocking decentralization and resilience, the original challenge in the network through distribution. We've got no need for a centralized server to provide that, so we can store it anywhere. And to retrieve things from the network, which is something like our little Filecoin corgi knows a lot about with those frisbees. Just kidding, just kidding. We do this with a peer-to-peer network. Each peer in the network also has a unique identifier called a peer ID instead of a content ID. Makes sense, right? Which is, again, of course, linked to a cryptographic identity and allows peers to communicate securely through an encrypted channel. And just a note on the cryptography we use for these content and peer IDs. Obviously we currently use a SHA algorithm, the most resilient one in the network, But a good point to note about IPFS is that even if, say, quantum computers do, crack this in the future, and we have to have better cryptography in the future, it's upgradable. So IPFS is going to stand the test of time in that respect as well. So discoverability on the network. How do we know to talk to each other, basically? In order for peers to discover each other and the network transports that they support, we use a distributed hash table. So probably most people have heard of a hash table here, and the distributed version isn't too different apart from the need for multiple peers to help maintain it. In case you haven't heard of a hash table, though, it's basically just like, key value pairs, or, like a phone book. So in order to get the value associated with the key, or in this case, the content ID on IPFS, a peer asks other peers in the network who has this row. It is a little bit more efficient than just like a general broadcast to everyone in the network, though, because peers with certain names or peer IDs are more likely to store certain rows. And so a peer knows which of its other peers is connected to. And so it's more likely to have the value of that key that they are looking for. Well, I just got a message saying you could just see my screen. Is this anyway? That's a lot of technical talk about how this works under the hood. But IPFS uses this kind of distributed hash table as a database, basically. And when either like a content ID or peer ID is added to IPFS, a peer can insert that row with some extra query info, and therefore it's now a content provider, which is cool. So if I did lose you in any of that talk, don't worry. The main thing to understand here is that all of this protocol and network logic, designed by people much smarter than me, by the way, but that I get the pleasure of working with now and learning from, so which is awesome. This is really what makes IPFS an important and valuable protocol, not just for Web3, but also for tech use cases in general. It's kind of mind-blowing what we can use it for, and you could see, the whole of the internet, kind of addressed this way in future, which would be really interesting. But and it's because it kind of enables distribution at scale, and provides verifiability of data, which is, really, really a cool use case. But the problem with IPFS is that unless everyone is willing to run and host their own IPFS nodes, well, and to serve that to other people, there's no real permanence of this data, because, why would random people help store your digital content for no reason? I mean, if I gave you a piece of content, would you agree to store that for free forever for me? Probably not, right? You might do it if I paid you, or if you liked me, or if you liked the data that I was giving you, but eventually you probably won't store it. So, and this is generally what happens despite the good intentions of a community. Less popular pieces of content or memes, no, probably content, will probably stop being hosted, and you can no longer retrieve them. We've all kind of probably experienced this with torrenting networks, and being unable to access less popular content on them or find it even. So this is where kind of pinning services like Pinata can help. But because we are looking to be an open, decentralized web mission, we also don't want to start paying centralized service providers to keep our content, and then, kind of end up with the same resilience problem we started this process with, and, probably causing vendor lock-in and losing the trustlessness we've gained. So for those of you playing at home, you probably realize this is where Filecoin comes in. And Filecoin is a blockchain, but it's been specifically architectured and designed to leverage kind of crypto economic incentive models that we're seeing out there, together with cryptographic proofs, to ensure that this data is stored persistently, it's reliable, it's verifiable, and it's in a distributed network. So it's the crypto kind of graphic proofs enable, smart contract-based permanence. And that means it's designed to be as permanent as you, the data owner, want it to be. So you can decide if you want that permanence requirement to be 500 years or 5 minutes. You kind of have total control over the time frame you want for your storage and how many copies of it you want to store for resilience. And to make all this work, Filecoin uses storage deals, which I won't go too much into the detail of these, but this is one of the main reasons Filecoin can be so cheap, so scalable, and is actually verifiable. You can, be sure that your data is stored in, say you wanted it stored on 8 different file code nodes, you can be sure it's there. The consensus mechanisms that ensure that rewards for good actors and penalties for bad actors, the first one is proof of replication. This proves the storage provider is storing a unique copy of original data. And the second one is proof of space-time, which is how providers prove that they still have the client's data, and which, anyone at any time can ask the provider for. And if they don't provide it, they're penalized because they have to stake Filecoin to be part of this storage network. And I won't go into heaps of details now, but it's kind of, there's a lot happening in this storage space. And if you're interested in being, a storage provider or going down that path, there's lots of docs out there on how to do that. I even met a company the other day in Australia called Holon, which are creating full solar server farms to host IPFS and Filecoin data and creating full businesses out of it. So that is an option if it's a way you want to go as well. There's heaps of ways to be part of this deal, but I'm a developer, so I'm going to move on to talking about the dev tooling. But just before I do that, just want to mention, again, it's the storage deals and these consensus mechanisms that, create data permanence and data timeframe sovereignty. So you can decide whether you want to store for 5 minutes or 500 years. And they also give you sovereignty over how many copies of that immutable, if it's on IPFS data you want to have, and on what providers as well. So this deal making structure makes the market really efficient, which makes prices cheap. And it also opens the door for us to say comply with regulations like GDPR, because there's a growing number of tools in the ecosystem. One is, I think, BitScreen, that allows you to filter your deals for what's relevant for you. So if you only want to store data on European services to comply with GDPR, that's something that you're starting to be able to do. There's toolings getting built in the space around those kind of things. All right, so hopefully I've given you a really, maybe more than you wanted, understanding of how IPFS and Filecoin work and fit together, and how they're different as well. But how they're perfect complements. So IPFS is a protocol, Filecoin's a blockchain. IPFS gives us immutable references, so no matter where the content lives, it can be retrieved. And Filecoin gives us persistent, verifiable storage, and it allows us to store massive volumes of data. It's, we could store other distributed storage chains in Filecoin, and we are starting to do that just to make sure that everyone's data in the world is actually saved, including their NFTs. And it gives us guarantees that this is happening as well. So I will, just before I get into the fun stuff of that dev tooling that's easy to use and you can use in your dApps, is there any questions that anyone wanted to ask about this so far? Sorry, hopefully I'm not taking too much time either. I didn't really time this. All good? All right, let's get into the fun stuff then. So, as you might have seen, IPFS and Filecoin are pretty in-depth protocols, and using these at the base layer is a challenge even for highly skilled engineers. And, for us, those of us, including me, that just want to build out of the box, there's a bunch of dev tooling options that we can use as well. So you can kind of see on this slide a good overview of some of the abstraction layers for you to leverage the immutable address system of IPFS with the permanence of Filecoin, and use it like you would any Web 2 tooling you might be used to. So one of the first things you might look at when you're starting out is, how do I access an IPFS CID in my browser? And because, IPFS is a protocol like HTTP, but it does not run on HTTP, we need to use an IPFS HTTP gateway. And what this does is allow our IPFS immutable content to be viewed on a regular browser. Or alternatively, you can use browsers like Brave or Opera, which have inbuilt support for IPFS. And you don't need to use a HTTP gateway. But since we're likely going to be creating apps that you want to be browser agnostic, there's a heap of providers out there that run IPFS HTTP gateways. And all that means is you're just adding a little bit of extra, URL kind of addressing around your CID, and all of a sudden it's available on HTTP because you're going through a gateway. And some of those gateway providers are, of course, IPFS itself. Cloudflare also runs one, Infura runs one, and Fleek runs one too. And you're like, who is Fleek? Well, Fleek's one of my favorite IPFS dev tools and projects, and one that I pretty much use for every app I build these days. So Fleek is basically a CI/CD tool and web hosting provider that works like Netlify or Vercel. You've probably heard those ones. And you can use it to deploy your apps for free. So the big difference between Fleek and those Web 2 services I mentioned, Netlify and Vercel, is they're all as easy to use as each other, but Fleek uses IPFS addressing to host your site or app, and it even offers ENS domain routing and connections on their platform. So, if you're creating a DApp or trying to, I really encourage you to, do it with the values of decentralization at your core, and use Fleek to deploy your front ends. If you don't 100% love it as much as I do, I'll give you your money back. Just kidding, it's totally free. So, there's nothing to give back. And I'm going to keep my day job and not move into comedy. Anyway, moving on. Another one of my favorite dev tools is NFT storage. By the way, has anyone here tried to make an NFT? Maybe just hands up, or like, yes, I've tried to make an NFT, or you own one, maybe not. Okay, well, for those of you that maybe haven't seen an NFT contract, has everyone heard of NFTs before? Would that be fair to say, at least?
Yeah, we've heard of it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I was gonna say, not living under a rock here. Okay, so thanks for the thumbs up, guys, appreciate it. So if you haven't seen an NFT contract, NFTs are basically created using a contract and that blockchain hash, and linking back to metadata for that blockchain contract hash of the particular NFT. And this metadata is basically just a JSON file that describes the NFT. So it could be an image, it could be a video, any other type of content. It could be a whole, code base, whatever you want in your NFT. It can be linked in this metadata. But it's really kind of important that this metadata is stored immutably and persistently, right? Because otherwise, you're really giving it's no longer verifiably non-fungible, because if you're putting a HTTP link in your metadata, that HTTP link could be anything the next day, or could be down the next day, or, could be censored the next day. So, this is why we've created NFT storage. It was specifically created as a public good to archive and persist NFT data. And it takes care of the complexity around, firstly, creating an IPFS CID for your NFT metadata, and then making an automatic deal with Filecoin to store it persistently and permanently. And it does this with like 8 times redundancy, so you're on at least 8 nodes, and a multi-generational time frame. So it's an industry standard as well. So over 45 million NFTs are currently stored on NFT.storage, and it's used by like NFT marketplaces like OpenSea and Magic Eden. And it's, as a public good, it's free forever for you to use up to a certain amount of storage. You'd have to store so many NFTs to hit that amount of storage, though, quite frankly. You'd have to be OpenSea to do that. But it's also, for the devs out there, as simple to use as importing the NPM library and writing a few lines of code in your front end. And if you're interested, or you've you haven't tried it before, or you want to try it, or you want to create an NFT, I've actually got a tutorial and GitHub link that you could fork and try it out. It's really super simple to use. You know, as a kind of React developer, like I basically imported this, wrote a few lines of code, and I was away and running on IPFS and Filecoin, and that's what we want, right? So even if you don't want to make any NFTs though as well, just as a hot tip, if you do hold any, I would really encourage you to back them up to nft.storage for yourself, so you can be sure you'll always have that NFT, especially if it's valuable to you, because you don't know where other people are storing the metadata for these NFTs that might not be on something like NFT storage, and it could disappear in who knows how many years. So if you do have your own NFT, you can back it up. So that's a cool little tip. Anyway, for storage that isn't NFTs though, this is where web3.storage comes in. Again, it's as simple to use as nft.storage is. You just import it as an npm package or JavaScript library. It's also got a Go client for those of you, like, sorry, I'm a bit biased because I'm always coming at this from like a React developer view, but it does have a Go client as well, so you can try that out. Web3 storage is another project built by IPFS and Filecoin, and it's designed to store data that isn't just, you know, NFT metadata. The difference between these as well is they've got really different kind of roadmaps as we go forward in building these products out more fully. So if it's not NFT data, definitely encourage you to use web3.storage, because there's going to be a bunch of functions and features coming out specifically for data that's not NFTs. So they've got very different roadmaps, and to future-proof your projects, you want to use web3 storage if you're not just storing NFTs, basically. The next dev tool is PowerGate, which is made by Textile, and this one's a bit more of an advanced tool for developers that kind of want more options around their data. So PowerGate is a Docker container wrapped around a Filecoin and IPFS node, and it gives you a lot of options to like configure miner selections and extend the functionality of IPFS and Filecoin. Textile itself as well also offers a Polygon bridge. So if you're looking for bridges between, you know, kind of Filecoin and other things, they've got Polygon and a couple of others going there as well, as a side note. There's also a heap of other dev tools out there. Those are the main ones that I use. But we often get a lot of questions around how you would build a relational database. And this is something that Web3 hasn't really got fleshed out yet. So there's a lot of things happening in the space. And there's a few things like I'd love to say, but also they're not ready yet. But OrbitDB is one of the projects that is working on creating this distributed database. So if you do like to get into the weeds and read more about that, you're like one of those hardcore devs, which I super admire, you can check out OrbitDB. Ceramic is another amazing team working on similar projects and using IPFS and a Filecoin under the hood. And it's also working on decentralized identity models, which is, you know, one of the biggest use cases for public blockchains, in my opinion. So that's awesome. So check those ones out as well. But yeah, that's the main dev tooling I wanted to get across. If you do nothing else, please use Fleek for your decentralized, you know, front end projects. You know, it's not really a decentralized app if you're then going and putting it on Vercel or a Web2 code base, right? And we also need to get away from using GitHub for everything and maybe, you know, IPFS it. But there is projects like Gitcoin, which, you know, I'm also starting to try and use as well. But anyway, I do want to try and inspire you with maybe some projects that are building on IPFS and Filecoin, so you can kind of see some of the cool stuff that we're enabling, and not just have me drone on to you about what's going on in the tech under the hood, which, you know, maybe isn't the most interesting part. So there's heaps of people using IPFS and Filecoin, and this kind of picture is actually way out of date, but it gives you an idea of kind of the growing list of both traditional tech and Web3 products and services that are using IPFS and Filecoin. Like, as you can see there, you know, MetaMask, some of the browsers, Brave, Microsoft. We actually contributed to a project on Microsoft, which some of you might have heard of, called Ion, which is a decentralized identity built on top of Bitcoin. And one of our team members from IPFS did a lot of, work with helping them build that project. So that's also really cool. So Uniswap, OpenSea, as I mentioned, heaps of projects building on IPFS and Filecoin in the ecosystem. And one of the clearest use cases for IPFS and Filecoin is in NFTs in the metaverse, as I've kind of mentioned. And, NFTs have like rocketed to mainstream attention. They're kind of, lots of people are realizing what it means to have a digital asset that can represent anything. And we need to make sure that as we go ahead and as we're leveraging these NFTs, we do so in a way that's engineered to stand the test of time, and it's doing it properly. So like I mentioned before, that we're making sure that we've got immutable and permanent metadata for these NFTs, and they're not just going to disappear tomorrow. So we can do that with IPFS and Filecoin, as I mentioned. So that's one of the big use cases there. And like I said, OpenSea is using IPFS and Filecoin in its minting platform and storing NFTs using NFT storage. So I've got them here. Some of the other projects, though, that I love include the song streaming platform Audius. Has anyone heard of Audius? This is one I love. It's kind of like a decentralized Spotify. It's giving creators control back over their content and kind of providing a fairer economic model to musicians. So that's a really awesome project, and they're using IPFS and Filecoin under the hood for that model. We've also got our friends over at Lipe here. So they're doing some amazing things, creating censorship resistant video platform for developers to use that can, create new video sharing platforms. So definitely check them out if you want to do anything with like video content as well. And again, they're using IPFS and Filecoin under the hood as well. So another cool app is Huddle, and I'm starting to use this more often. It's basically a decentralized version of Zoom. And what's great about this use case is that instead of relying on centralized networks, using a distributed network kind of makes absolute sense in terms of speed and performance. And they're kind of adding more features every week to that. So that's a really cool platform project as well. I was also just in Austin for South by Southwest recently, and one of the cool projects I saw was NFTs for filmmakers. And, it wasn't just an NFT. It was all about creating community contribution and a fair economic model. And they were called Never Forget This. They're creating this community platform for filmmakers to create the films they want and to interact with the community while making sure creators keep getting fairly compensated for their time and their projects. I really think this could be kind of a new economic model for creatives and for filmmakers to, have a big project, because things like Netlify actually don't buy your content until you've made it. So how do you fund it? There's a lot of, questions like that out in the industry. And then once you've made it, that can get copied anywhere and you don't necessarily get any, if it's super successful, you're just being paid the same amount pretty much. So with, NFTs and royalties around kind of some of the content you create, it's kind of crazy how much that could give back to artists for creating all this content. So keep an eye out for their upcoming film anyway, which they totally explain what I just said way better on, because it's launching soon. And also, if you do want to see some of the more awesome projects, because sorry, I realize we're kind of going super over time. If you do want to see some more awesome projects out there leveraging IPFS and Filecoin, have a look at the FCC talk by Juan Benet on building Web3, because he talks about a bunch more of these projects and how they're using IPFS and Filecoin. Also, just want to talk about our social good use cases. So IPFS and Filecoin are also super invested in and passionate about supporting social good projects. So we supply grants and funding, and we've got a non-profit foundation called the Filecoin Foundation for the Decentralized Web. And this helps projects conserve imported data and make it available to everyone. So some of our partnerships include Starling Lab, where we're working to, resiliently and permanently store the testimonies of genocide survivors. We have some things happening around the Ukraine and Russian crisis as well, where we're moving all data from Ukraine into other service providers at the moment as well. We had someone talking about that to us recently. We've also got a partnership with the Internet Archive, which is collaborating with Protocol Labs on onboarding, a heap of data sets to store, forever and immutably. So it's not going to just get changed in the future as well. So heaps of things around the environment and around scientific data as well, getting stored on IPFS and Filecoin free of charge for people, and, making it available, forever, basically. So these are the kind of projects that we really love to see. And if you do know people with projects like this, we do have, grants and a grant process available for those kind of things as well. All right, I'm going to pretty much finish off there just by giving you some resources where you can kind of learn more. If you just want to go through some tutorials and figure out how to do things, there's Proto School and NFT School. Those are both really cool resources for just going through like some tutorials on how you use this stuff and what giving you some ideas on how you could create things. Obviously there's our docs. Everyone says the docs. It's, I get bored. I have to read it. Once I start reading docs, like I'll read one page and I have to go back to the beginning because I don't remember what I've read. So I'm a big YouTuber, and we do have quite a lot of content on YouTube that you can go through as well. And I also like hands-on tutorials like Proto School and NFT School. So try those out. We've also got heaps of grants as well. And I think one of the best ways, if I can, I'll just go back to that. One of the best ways to be involved, and I always encourage everyone to do this, is by just joining a hackathon. Just have a go. It doesn't matter if your product doesn't even work at the end of it. The best parts about them are that you've learned something, that your knowledge has grown, that you've met some new people, and that you've tried something new. And fun fact, I actually got hired at my last job at IBM because I met someone at a hackathon 5 years before that who rang me up and said there was a job going. So you just kind of never know who you might meet at a hackathon. And I know there's lots of other stories about, I actually founded a startup out of a hackathon that I joined at one point as well. I completely dropped it and we didn't finish it. But we did, started an accelerator. We were starting to build that. So you honestly just never know where something like a hackathon, and there's a lot of them online now, could take you. So I really encourage you to join something like that, which, you're already joined us because you're here already. But just to give some backstory about why I love hackathons so much as well. They just can open up the world. So you can find some more ideas on our hackathons board as well. It's not just about our upcoming events, but there's like 99 project ideas, and you can have a look through past winners and what they built on our hackathons.filecoin.io site as well. And I'll just go back to this last slide. If you don't want to keep in touch, feel free to tweet at me. I'm at Developer Ali. I pretty much answer everyone, or I try to. So feel free to tweet me or join our Discord and Slack. We've also got an ambassador program. If you kind of go down the rabbit hole and go, I really love this tech, and I want to organize community events, then talk to us about our Orbit community program that we have. You can also join us for our Gather Town weekly kind of chats as well, if you want to try out an idea or talk to us about something that you're doing or get some tips and tricks. And I think that's all from me. Sorry for taking a bit longer than I expected. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions, like either about how I got where I am, or where you think you should start, or which way you want to go, or any of the stuff we've kind of discussed today as well. But thank you so much, everyone. You're an awesome audience.
Thank you so much, Ali. I think a few of the fellows have a few questions.
Oh, awesome.
Vidushi, do you want to go first? I saw that you had raised your hands.
Yes, I think I've got one from...
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Hi,
I'll
Shreya.
stop sharing my screen too, sorry, so I can see everyone properly.
Yeah,
Awesome.
actually,
Hello.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Before I had this question, like all the on NFT visible on OpenSeas, is this from NFT storage? Are they picked up from NFT storage? storage?
So OpenSea uses their own indexing, and I believe they get most of that off actual on-chain data. And then, obviously they read the token URI, which connects to that metadata. But when I was talking about how how OpenSea uses NFT storage, it's really on their minting platform. So when you go, you can mint a new NFT through OpenSea's they've got a website where you can do it with no code basically, and they use NFT storage under the hood for that. Yeah. So it really is an industry standard. It's like, you're not going to go wrong using it basically.
Got it. I have one more question. You showed one tool, Audios. So I was
Mhm.
exploring it and I found that check the music or to listen the music, you need not to pay anything. So how are they making money?
That's a good question. I honestly haven't dug deep into that side of their economic model. I think at the moment they're probably heavily subsidized. So in future, I'd say that they will roll out a subscription model. But as with all or most new businesses, I would assume that they've raised money out in the world, and now they're subsidizing until they get to a certain number of user bases, so then they can afford to charge for these kind of things, because you've got a set number of users already using your platform. And that's the same way with most startups as well. I would assume, I'm not going to say that is true, but that's probably possibly true.
Means once they get certain number of users, they'll
Yeah,
charge.
exactly.
Got it.
And a certain number of musicians, right?
Yeah.
So they need to have a good enough product for people to want to use it and want to pay for it. And I think even things like Netflix and Spotify were probably very cheap or free in the beginning as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all. Thank you, Ali.
Awesome, thank you, great questions. I think I've got one here from Shirin as well. Is it feasible to build an application like Spotify on a decentralized platform where we can keep track of music NFTs? I would say yes. I think that's a similar thing to what Audius is doing. I also think one of the big benefits of NFTs, and this is well, I won't go down the right. So one of the big benefits of NFTs is not just that it's like a collectible, it's more the community involvement you can get with NFTs. You can pass on royalties, you can have, this fractional ownership model. Like I was talking about that filmmaker project, what they're aiming to do is really create this community of filmmakers that create content, and then if someone else uses that piece of content in the work, some part of that is paid as royalties. So you can imagine that this could last for 200 years if people are using a really popular piece of content, or longer, who knows. If we're still like looking at virtual screens anyway in the future, could live forever. So I think one of the big things about NFTs is how you create these interactive pieces with them, and how you play with that creative model, or that fractional ownership model, or ownership of real things in the real world, or assuring digital identity. NFTs are really we're only scratching the surface of NFTs, and even I don't understand it. But yes, I'd say that the answer is yes, and that's a long-winded way of saying that.
I have a question over here. How would you track the royalties? I mean, if suppose there's a listener for I have a music NFT, okay, and there's a listener for it. Like suppose right now there's Spotify and all these other platforms. I'm not sure how we track royalties over there, but is it feasible for us if suppose we are building a platform where we are trying to give ownership to creators and curators of the NFT? So how would we be able to track the royalties that the music is getting efficiently?
How would you do it efficiently? So if you're starting out with NFTs, probably the best place to go is to have a look at the Open Zeppelin contracts for NFTs, so the ERC 721. And this has a bunch of options, including royalties and how you would track that that you can build in, and they're, you know, security audited Solidity contract templates, basically, that you can then add functionality to. So NFTs are really flexible. Like, you have your base NFT, and then basically you can code whatever you like into that after, you know, you meet those minimal standards. Then, like any kind of thing you build on the web or with a backend in Web 2, you build in functions that you tell your smart contract what you want it to be able to do and how you want it to be able to operate. The only difference is that you then put it on the blockchain, and it assures that it always functions like that and doesn't get changed unless you want it to be. You can have upgradable contracts, obviously. So in terms of making sure that the royalties are paid out to artists as you go, it depends on your model. If you are creating something like Spotify, say the artist owns the song, and then basically they allow this decentralized version of Spotify to play their song, then I would say that potentially that platform has to pay that you know, song creator per listen or per some other whatever's coded into that contract for as royalties for that song. And that could be super minimal amount of money, or it could be a lot of money. It's really up to the coder or product maker to decide how that model's going to work, and then you code it in. Hopefully that kind of answers your question, but really you've got to decide on the architecture and how you want your system to work, like you would with any other product.
So basically, I'll have to create a code over it, and I'll have to connect with all those streaming platforms where I want to collect royalties from, so that I can keep a track of how much usage it is.
So if you're looking to connect with Spotify and like traditional music platforms, it's not really necessarily going to work that way, because you know, they're not accepting NFT music, are they? So yeah, thanks for the link there. But yeah, if you have a look at ETHWMN, they specifically have a royalties part of the ETHWMN contract for NFTs. That could give you an idea on how royalties get paid out for an NFT contract. And it's not just necessarily on sales. You could, you know, make it per stream. If it's on something like Audius, you know, you can't tell Spotify it has to pay them, because they just don't acknowledge that. They'll just get this, you know, and that's the problem, right? That's why we're trying to create these new platforms that do allow these new models of royalties.
Okay.
Thanks, Vidushi. Hadn't seen that one before. It's cool. I'll have to check it out later. Yeah, so, you know, that's why we're trying to make these new models, because artists are obviously unfairly paid. Like, they've been living poor forever while contributing kind of a great amount to our society, especially in the last few years, where we've all, well, you know, for me, we've all kind of been sitting at home, unable to go anywhere, and watching vast amounts of content for like super low prices or nothing in some cases, you know. I think artists and a new YouTube wrapper would be great, that, you know, pays these creators fairly as well. There's lots of scope for us to create these new economic models, especially in the creator space at the moment, and in the gaming space, and in the financial space as well. Even in the legal and real estate space, or insurance space as well. Like, you know, why isn't your insurance automatically triggered when conditions are met, instead of having this middleman like hassle you about every single detail, things like that. I think there's a lot of scope for us to bring a lot of value here, and make a fairer system. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there, but yeah. Thank you for the questions, though. Really, really great to hear. Definitely check out ETHWMN and how they handle royalties, though, as well. And maybe dig into Audius and how they're doing it as well. It'd be interesting to see what their economic model's like. I think Filecoin has a video out on Audius, but I'm not sure if they dig into the economic model on that one. More the developer side, I think. All righty.
Awesome. Do we have any more questions, or I think we can wrap this up? Awesome then. Ali, thank you so much for taking out the time on a Sunday. I'm sure, you know, you must have a super busy schedule. So thank you so much. And I'm sure they all have a great time, had a great time today. And if you could just maybe let us know how we can contact you later in case they have any questions, that would be amazing. And yeah.
Yep. If you do want to contact me, I've just posted my Twitter link in the chat there. Otherwise, join the Filecoin Slack, which let me just see if I can get a link to that now, actually, make it easy. Invite, copy invite link. Just do some clicking around here. So I hang out in the Filecoin Slack, open to the public. Most of our channels are open. We like to work in public. So even our DevRel and our hackathons channel, you see us like organizing ourselves in public, which is kind of maybe sometimes annoying, but also cool. You can see exactly what we're doing. So I'm always available there too. And my name's Alison Wonderland on that Slack as well. So yeah, feel free to contact me as well. I'm happy for you to ask me personal questions about, where you want to go with your career or how you might get there as well, or how you can get a job in Web3 or in Web2 even, whichever way you want to go. So feel free to contact me.
That's great, Ali. Thank you so much. And we'll hopefully cross paths again very soon. And
yeah, thanks for inviting me. It was awesome to see so many like passionate, women going into this field. So thank you for hosting.
perfect. I think we can wrap the session now. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining today. Have a great
Awesome.
weekend.
Appreciate it, and hope I see you around the decentralized system soon. Bye everyone.
Bye.